You guys need to check out these class setups right now. I've never done this before. I've always usually shown one class setup at a time, but I think it's about that time of the year where I'm going to share all of my top 5 best class setups for the M4A1, because with the new loadout system this year, you can really make up your weapon however you wanted to, depending on what your playstyle is. And I pretty much got everything for somebody right here. So whether you're an aggressive player, stealthy player, or you're a reserved player, or you like playing Warzone, I got some class setups that I could definitely share with you. And I know you guys are going to enjoy these classes. This is going to be a bit of an experimental video. And if you end up liking this video, feel free to drop a like at the end of this video and request what top 5 class setups that you want to see for other weapons in the game. So let's just get this thing started. So my first M4A1 class setup is going to be a 2-shot M4A1 class setup. This one is personally fun in my opinion. For my muzzle, I'm running that monolithic suppressor. Now the reason why I'm running monolithic suppressor, because you're only going to get 10 rounds in each magazine. So it's really important to stay as stealthy as you possibly can, because you do not want multiple enemies facing you at a time. Let's talk about the SOCOM rounds. So the SOCOM rounds adds more damage as well as more range. The highlight of this is that it actually does increase that damage enough. Now the main key component to this 2-shot class setup is that you must use stopping power. If you're not using stopping power, you're not going to get that 2-shot kill. So moving on for rear grip, I'm using stippled grip tape. This is going to give us more aim down sight speed as well as sprint to fire speed. You need to have the jump on your enemies, especially since we're running with such little rounds in each magazine. You definitely need to have the upper hand in those gunfights. For our perk, we're using the fully loaded perk. This is very important and essential to this class setup. Yes, you can run munitions box if you want to, but I really don't recommend that, because you're gonna find yourself out of ammo before you can even earn your munitions box. So having the fully loaded perk definitely does help you out a ton. Moving on to the optic. So the reason why I put an optic on this one, and I chose specifically the Cronin, because it's just personal preference. You know, you can use either this one or the GI Mini Reflex, whatever suits your fancy. Now the reason why you got to put a sight on this is because when you're only working with just 10 rounds per magazine, you want to make sure that your aim is as precise as possible. Also, one thing I do have to note about this class setup is that you want to play as up close and personal as possible, because like I said, if you are not that accurate with this gun, you're not going to hit your shots from long distance. However, with the way that this class setup is, you can definitely melt people from long distance, and especially if you put on that stopping power field upgrade, that is super important. So let's move on to the perks. So this is also very important. So for perk number 1, I'm using the quick fix perk so that we don't have to worry about stim shotting ourselves when we do get hurt in those gunfights, or there's multiple enemies coming up against us. If you do get a kill or 2, your character will self-revive without you having to do anything like a stim shot. So that's very helpful. After you get into a gunfight, you get a kill and you will instantly revive your health super fast. So that's why quick fix is important to this 2-shot class setup. Then for perk number 2, we're running with Ghost. Like I said earlier, you want to stay as stealthy as possible. There is nothing worse than being exposed on the minimap or the compass when you've got multiple enemies coming at you and you only got 10 rounds to work with. And I would highly recommend flanking around the map instead of just going head on against your enemies. For perk 3, we're using tune-up so that we can earn our field upgrade a lot faster, and with each kill you will earn that field upgrade that much faster. All right, so that about wraps it up for this 2-shot M4A1 class setup. Now let's move on to our next class setup. Now if you guys didn't know, you can actually make different variants of the same weapon if you want to. As you can see here, I have stealth, all around, and aggro, which also stands for aggressive. Now let's go move on to the stealth M4A1 class setup. This is one of my favorites. It's a pretty fun class setup. It has a really fast mobility and you can run around the map really quickly, and it's really great for flanking and staying stealthy, which is my primary playstyle and why I like it a lot. So for the barrel, we're running with the FSS 12.4-inch Predator. This is going to give us sound suppression as well as aim down sight speed. Another thing that you have to take into consideration is that you want to play as up close and personal as possible. Try to close that gap between yourself and the enemies. For optic, we're running with the Cronin LP945 Mini Reflex. You don't have to put a sight on this. If you want to, you can always remove the optic and you can put on the fully loaded perk so that you don't have to worry about reloading as much. So that's something to consider as well, and you will be reloading your weapon pretty constantly. Now for stock, we're running with the no stock attachment, one of my favorite attachments in the game because it gives you more movement speed, which is going to be important to get around the map faster, as well as aim down sight speed, again, to help us win those gunfights. For rear grip, we're running with the stippled grip tape, and for our underbarrel, we're running with that Merc foregrip so that we're able to challenge enemies from medium to long range, as well as hip fire if we need to in those close quarter combat situations. So with this class setup, you mainly want to use the Dead Silence Field upgrade. Whenever you get it, always pop that bad boy, like when you're deep in the enemy spawn or you're trying to flank an enemy and you don't want him to hear your footsteps. That would be a good time to call in your Dead Silence. And then for perks, we're going to switch this to EOD as our first perk so that we take less damage from explosives. For perk 2, of course, going along with the theme of stealth, we're going to be running with Ghost. Then for perk 3, we're going to change this one to Tracker because we're going to be flanking around the map. Being able to see enemy footsteps on the map is going to help you locate enemies that much easier, as well as expose enemy locations that you didn't even know were there. Okay, and for the next class setup, let's talk about the all-around M4A1 class setup. So for starters, we're running with the monolithic suppressor. This is going to help us stay as stealthy as we possibly can. It's going to make sure that our weapon does not get seen on the enemy compass whenever we're firing our weapons, and it also gives you a damage range increase. Then for our barrel, we're going to be running with the Corvus custom marksman barrel. This one's going to give us more damage range, bullet velocity, as well as recoil control. Now there is a con of aim down sight speed as well as movement speed, so you definitely want to keep that into account, that you don't really want to rush way too hard with this weapon. You want to make sure you're pre-aiming around every corner, around every line of sight. Always assume that there is an enemy there, so that way you're never caught by surprise. We do have the attachment no stock once again to help mitigate those cons, and it's going to give us more movement speed as well as aim down sight speed. For rear grip, we're running with stippled grip tape, and for our ammunition, we're going to be running with the 50 round magazine. That way we can put in more shots in case we do get into situations where we go up against multiple enemies at a time, or if we're engaging in long range combat and we're not able to hit all of our shots. 50 round mags is definitely sufficient enough. The reason why I don't put on the 60 round mags on this specific class setup is because I do notice that movement speed reduction. It just felt way too sluggish for this class setup specifically. And as far as perks go, they are going to remain the same. You can run EOD, Ghost, and Tracker. Moving on to my aggro class setup. This is the aggressive M4A1 class setup. So we're running with the Corvus custom marksman barrel. It's going to give us damage range, bullet velocity, and recoil control. For the optic, this one is personal preference. It's really up to you. I just feel like the sight on the weapon just helps me aim in on my targets that much easier with more accuracy. If you've got amazing accuracy and you're okay with the iron sights, you can always take off the optic on it and opt for the fully loaded perk. Again, this is an aggressive class setup. You can put on the fully loaded perk if you want to, so that you have more ammo to start with, and you don't have to worry about scavenging for that 5.56 ammo around the map. Now for stock, we're using no stock, and then for our rear grip, we're running with that stippled grip tape. And for our ammunition, we are running with the 50 round magazine. Since this is an aggressive M4A1 class setup, the perks are going to be switched just a little bit. So with perk 1, you do have some flexibility here. You can either choose EOD or kill chain or quick fix. If you're an above average player and you are confident enough to get those kill streaks, I would definitely run kill chain. And then for perk 2, you can run with restock, so that when you're rushing around the map aggressively, you're always going to stay stocked up on your C4s as well as your stim shots. Restock is actually going to help you a lot in many different types of situations. Or if you want to, you can run with hardline. If you pair that up with kill chain, it's a very deadly combination. And for perk 3, if you're going to choose restock, putting on shrapnel is definitely a good idea, so that you can always have 2 C4s and 2 stim shots all the time throughout the match as you're playing. This is very handy for when you throw a C4 at somebody and they're running that EOD perk. You may not get it the first time, but you could always toss a second C4 to be able to get that kill. Now for the final class setup, this is my favorite M4A1 Warzone custom loadout. So let's talk about this really quick. For our muzzle, we're running monolithic suppressor. It's important to stay as stealthy as possible in Warzone. Sounds are just super loud when you're firing your weapon, and nearby enemies are going to hear where you're at and try to track you down. So that's why having monolithic suppressor is going to be very helpful in avoiding those kind of situations. And for our barrel, this one is optional. It really just depends on you yourself as a player. I personally like the Corvus Custom Marksman because it gives us everything we need for Warzone without really too much penalty of the aim down sight speed and movement speed. Now, if you could deal with the aim down sight and movement speed, I would definitely run with the stock M16 Grenadier, because This one's going to give you the max amount of damage range as possible, as well as bullet velocity, and the recoil control is going to be huge for controlling that recoil when you're getting into those super long range gunfights in Warzone. But for me personally, I find the Corvus Custom Marksman to be okay for me. Now for our optic, again, I'm using the Cronin LP945 sight on this gun. You can choose whatever you want to, but I feel like this is sufficient enough. Now for our ammunition, we're running with 60 round magazines this time. Now, you know, aim down sight speed and movement speed is not all that important in Warzone. What's more important is your range, bullet velocity, as well as how much ammo you have in your reserve, because you're going to be firing your weapon a lot and you're going to find yourself in situations where you're out of ammo. So having as much ammo to begin with is going to be very important. Now here is another optional attachment. You can put on the operator foregrip. This one's going to help you with that recoil control. Like I said, again, you're going to get into a lot of long range gunfights, but if your aim is okay and you're good at controlling recoil, take off the underbarrel and put on the fully loaded perk. You know, this is going to help you out, especially if you don't have enough money for a munitions box. I would definitely run with the fully loaded perk. So for our secondary, we're running with the RPG. Now, the reason why I picked this one is because a lot of people love using vehicles in Warzone. You can pretty much get a squad wipe with just a single RPG. It's really great, especially in endgame situations. If people are camping in a house, you can just pop that bad boy inside through a window and you'll be able to get multiple kills at a time, or just down a lot of opponents at the same time. Now for perks, we're running with Cold Blood.